There's power around a table or a socially distanced picnic blanket. And Jesus understood that power. The last night before he was going to be betrayed and crucified, he could have done all sorts of things. Like, if it were me, I would have thought, like, how do I optimize this time that I have left? He could have done the Sermon on the Mount Part 2, gathered people to hear all of his last teachings. He could have gone down to the synagogue and read the scriptures and explained them to people. He could have gone out into the streets to find people who needed to be healed and performed miracles all night long. But instead, we read in Luke 22 that he sent Peter and John, saying, "Go and make preparations for us to eat the Passover." He chose to spend that night before he would die around a table with his closest friends. And this is a night that we obviously talk about a lot every time we have communion, and it has been the subject of lots of different art over the years, including this very famous painting by Leonardo da Vinci of the Last Supper. And let me be the first to tell you, this is not what it actually looked like. In case you were wondering, the thing that gets me the most is that they're all on the same side of the table, and I just, like, how do you even talk like that? But it is a beautiful painting, and there's so much in it if you look it up online, or if you were an art history person and you kind of understand about the way that Da Vinci put this together, that it is a masterpiece. And to be totally honest, all of that goes right over my head because I wasn't an art history person, but I can still look at it and appreciate the individuality of the people around the table. He painted it in the moment after Jesus said, "One of you at this table will betray me." So if you look at it, they're all like, who is it? Is it me? Is it you? What is he talking about? You can kind of see that they're all kind of driven to confusion over this. And I love that chaos of it. The other thing that I love, like I said, the individuality, we can think about the disciples as this like united group of people that we lump together, but each one of them was an individual that Jesus found and called and brought to his table. So we have Bartholomew on the end, and then James the Lesser. How would you like if you were in a group of just 12 people and your nickname was James the Lesser? But that's him. After that, we have Andrew, and then here's Judas, who would end up betraying Jesus later that night. We'll talk about him in a little while. Peter, who we talk about all the time, including in a little while. Then we have John and his brother James, James the Greater. He definitely won that nickname battle. This is Jesus in the middle. I am assuming you guys knew this. Here is Thomas. Thomas is the one who would later doubt that Jesus had been resurrected until he was able to see him on his own. And then this poor guy, I think it's Philip. I always forget Philip. This is Philip. Then we have Matthew, Jude, and Simon. And what I love about this, shout out to my after party friends who are in my after party small group, is we know that Matthew was a tax collector, which meant he was like basically on the side of Rome. And Simon was a zealot, which means he was like, we're going to use violence to get rid of Rome. It would be like someone on the very far right and the very far left sitting at a table together, because that's what Jesus does. That's the power of the table. Now, I want to spend a little time on James and John. So James the Greater and John. These guys had the nickname Sons of Thunder. Like, talk about an Avengers kind of name. If I had a nickname, it would be Daughter of Thunder. But really cool until you read that it's actually because they were angry all the time. They were known more for their temper than anything else. These were the guys that made everything a competition. They were always just flying off the handle. Everything was the end of the world, and they were going to bring justice however they wanted to. And you see this in Luke chapter 9. It says, as the time drew near for him to ascend to heaven, Jesus resolutely set out for Jerusalem. He sent messengers ahead to a Samaritan village to prepare for his arrival. But the people of the village did not welcome Jesus because he was on his way to Jerusalem. When James and John saw this, they said to Jesus, "Lord, should we call down fire from heaven to burn them up?" Like, these are the guys you want on your team, right? Like, burn them. These are disciples of Jesus, sons of thunder. They were angry. They're the ones, like if you go to Thanksgiving dinner, These are like the uncles who sit down and want to talk politics the moment that you sit down, and they're just like spouting out arguments that you know they think about over and over again, and you were like, this is the only thing I didn't want to talk about, but they just bring it up, or they have their one issue, you know, that something sets them off, and they get going, and they don't even like need you in the conversation. That's how these guys were, and then it gets worse, because they were also mama's boys. In Matthew 20, I kid you not, they had their mom come to Jesus and ask if one of them could sit on his right side and one of them could sit on his left side in heaven. They got their mom involved. Now, if you have studied the words of Jesus, you know that wasn't the way to go with Jesus, and he turned it into a lesson on the greatest becoming the least and the least becoming the greatest. But come on. Mothers in the room, happy Mother's Day. Please raise children who don't need you to tell their boss they need a promotion when they're in their 20s and 30s. So that's James and John, sons of thunder, mama's boys. Then we have Peter, who's one of my personal favorites. He was a fisherman when Jesus found him, and that's the story that you'll hear where Jesus says, come and follow me, I'll make you fishers of men. And he had faith to leave all of that behind and follow Jesus. He was the one who had the faith to walk out on the water to the Jesus. And even earlier in this evening, when Jesus washed the disciples' feet, he was so passionate that he asked Jesus to wash his whole body, like he was just all in. We see this come out in Luke 22. Simon is also Peter because names in the Bible can be confusing. So just know, Simon and Peter, same person. Simon, Simon, Jesus said, Satan has asked to sift all of you as wheat, but I have prayed for you, Simon, that your faith may not fail. And when you have turned back, strengthen your brothers. But he replied, Lord, I'm ready to go with you to prison and to death. So this guy talks a good game. But Jesus answered, I tell you, Peter, before the rooster crows today, you will deny 3 times that you know me. And that's what went on to happen. The same Peter had just been like, I'm with you to prison and to death. When they take Jesus away 3 different times, someone asks if he was with Jesus, and he says, I didn't even know him. He was so quick to desert this person that he said he was with, like ride or die. And in fact, after Jesus' resurrection, he goes and finds Peter back on a boat. He had just gone back to what he had been doing before, back fishing, back just living that normal life, not chasing after what Jesus had brought him into. He was a deserter at a table with some mama's boys. But they were all at the table, and that's the point, because Jesus brings broken people to his table. But the beauty of the table is that the people there don't stay broken, because at his table, there's life. When we look at Peter, we see someone who denied even knowing Jesus, becoming the person on whom the church was built. It says in Matthew 16, this verse we've talked about over and over in this series, and I tell you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overcome it. This man who had run away to go back to fishing ended up giving the rest of his life to build the church because he had found life in Jesus and he wanted other people to have it. And to the point where he gave his life for the sake of the church. Tradition says that he was crucified for his faith and that he asked to be hung upside down because he didn't even see himself worthy of being killed the same way that Jesus was. Peter went from being a deserter to someone who was willing to lay his life down because he found life at the table. And that's not all. At his table, there's love. We look at James and John and these epitome of angry people that you wouldn't necessarily want to eat a meal with, and yet they became known for their love. James went on to be the first apostle to be martyred, the first one killed for his faith, and he didn't fight back. He allowed it to happen. And then John became known as the apostle of love. He's the one who wrote the Gospel of John and the 3 epistles, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John, and the book of Revelation. And all throughout those, he's talking about love all the time. This is love, not that we loved God, but that he loved us and sent his son for us. For God so loved the world. He talked over and over about love because he had been changed. They came in broken, but they found life at the table and they found love at the table.